So who am I? I'm Stu Schwartz. I'm with Symantec. I'm part of the product security team. This is my second OWASP conference and my first time doing any presentation, so be gentle. Before we get started, I'd like to actually have the panelists introduce themselves, and first I'd like to thank them for participating. So.
Thanks. So my name is Jeff Williams. I'm the chair of OWASP. You may have seen me this morning.
I'm Eric Chin. I'm a technical director in Symantec Security Response. Basically, we're the guys fielding the malicious attacks, analyzing them, and creating content like AV signatures and IPS SIGs.
I'm Robert Hansen. I run Sec Theory out of Austin, Texas, and I also run Hackers and Slackers.
Jeremiah Grossman, founder and CTO of White Hat Security.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. So for the first question, if you had a crystal ball 10 years ago, would you envision where the security industry is today? Why don't we start off with Jeff on that one?
If I had a crystal ball 10 years ago, yeah, so I think that, yeah, it's not that hard to project where the security industry would have been today, because I don't really think it's changed that much. The same kind of flaws that we're seeing today are the same flaws that we saw 10 years ago and earlier. It's sort of old wine in new bottles for a lot of this. At least that's my perspective. And I think that's what's really got me frustrated about the whole thing, is that we're really not learning. We're not making a whole lot of progress. So that's my take on it, is I think it is predictable, and I think we're going to be in the same boat in 10 years from now.
I think I would totally agree, but I think the threat landscape has definitely changed, and the risk is far greater today. Like we were talking about 2000, 1999, what did we have? We had Happy 99 Worm for malicious code threats, just a joke. And then in 2000, we had Code Red, which was the first big one, but still Code Red didn't steal your credit cards, didn't hack an e-commerce site, isn't attacking industrial control systems. So the mistakes are exactly the same. When we talk about the vulnerabilities in Code Red to the vulnerabilities today, we're talking about exactly the same things, but the risk today is so much greater now, I think.
So to be completely honest, I think if you'd been asked me 15 years ago, I would have had a better answer than I would have had 10 years ago. 15 years ago, I would have said, yeah, nothing's going to change. It's going to be pretty much exactly the same. Everything's going to be broken. But I was naive and dumb 15 years ago. I was just getting started. And 10 years ago, I kind of thought I knew what I was doing a little bit, I had some exposure, and I would have said, well, this is really easy. A lot of these problems they can just solve. All you need is good frameworks, and hadn't gone through that kind of catharsis and punishment that big business brings upon us.
So I guess I was not contemplating that question 10 years ago at all. I was just starting web security, right, hacking into stuff, and everybody was focused on firewalls and SSL, and I didn't understand why, because I could hack anything I wanted with a browser. And but I guess what I hoped back then was that people would take application security seriously. So at least I think we're starting to get that far. People know what it is. Statistics reports all say the same things. Web hacking is how data loss occurs. But one thing that's noticeable in the things that I work on daily with regards to 10 years ago versus now is over the last 10 years, I guess the network has gotten secure enough to push the attacks to the web layer. What I spend a lot of my time thinking now is, how secure does the web need to be now? What is secure enough for the web to push them to the mobile platform or something else? That's kind of, does it need to be perfect?
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, let me just add on real quickly. I think that the trend that Jeremiah just pointed out is exactly right, is that while the vulnerabilities won't change, they will continue to progress up the stack, right? Like we may eventually get the web layer figured out, but by then we'll be building apps at a higher layer and we'll be making the same mistakes over again at a higher layer.
Okay, great, thanks. So moving forward, do you think we're going to fundamentally need to break the core architecture of the web to fix some of these vulnerabilities, these problems, or are we going to be able to fix these in a non-intrusive fashion?
I don't think you're going to be able to do either, to be honest.
Pardon me?
I don't think you'll be able to do either.
Well, that's an answer.
For people who say, look, things are fundamentally broken, we have to start all over. Yeah, that may be the case. Look, you could take everything we know today, start all over and fix all those problems maybe, from an architectural point of view from the start. But anything you build from scratch is just going to have other issues. So we're still going to be in the same place with just different issues. So I don't think that fundamentally re-architecting everything and starting from scratch would put us in a risk-free or a lower risk place than we are today. We would have very similar issues, just different ones instead.
So we will reinvent everything because we do every 10 years or so, right? So it is going to happen eventually that we'll have some new technology that won't be the browser exactly, but will probably be some merged rich thing that's like HTML5 and Flash and JFX and a whole bunch of other things mixed together. And we'll be writing code to that platform. What I'm optimistic about, and I don't want to paint a terrible picture here, is I'm optimistic that these flaws aren't really that complicated. And if we can get over the hurdle of taking the lessons that we've learned from other platforms, going back from Woods Hole database studies all the way up through the stuff that we're doing now with ISAPI and other content security policy and so on, if we can take those lessons and apply them to the next big thing, we can make it better. The time lag doesn't have to be 20 years before we stamp out a class of vulnerabilities in a technology.
Oh, I'm super conflicted about this answer. I honestly, I think that we really can't fix a lot of these problems without breaking stuff. We've proven it with tons of these vulnerabilities. I think the CSS history hack, thank you guys for fixing, was a great example. It took the courage to break something to make us all a lot more secure than we were before. I also think that there's some dramatic changes happening in the industry. First of all, we're moving a lot more to the mobile platform, and we're not relying so much on the browser in the mobile space. We're relying on these apps, and these apps are, of course, are driven over port 80, but they're really sort of abstracted, and a lot of those traditional vulnerabilities don't really matter as much. Still, there's some there, but nowhere near what we're normally talking about. So I think within 10 years from now, there's going to be a fairly large shift towards these mobile platforms and more sort of sandboxed sort of, direct applications. They only do one thing, very site-specific. I mean, clearly we still have browsers, and that's not going to change, but maybe they're just a lot less important.
I think I'll probably mostly agree with Robert there. If there are some fundamental issues out there that are going to require us to break the web in order to fix them, whether or not we will or anybody's going to is another question entirely. To fix cross-site request forgery or malware on web pages, we're going to have to break the web. We have iframes, right? Who thinks iframes are a good idea, right? But that's, yeah. But we're going to need them to make sure we have online advertising and Facebook like buttons, right? That's the trade-off we make. We make security. We make things insecure so we can have a like button. I mean, that's basically the trade-off. And the thing that, it's not so much discouraging, I don't have the right word, but when it comes to, let's say, the browser security side, the reason who's holding the control is really 3 or 4 companies, Mozilla, Microsoft, Google, and Apple. I mean, they're going to make the security choices for the entire web for everyone. So it's not like anybody else is really going to have a say. There's going to be user groups and things like that, but it's going to come down to those 4 companies deciding what is secure enough.
Can I comment on that? So I understand those 4 companies do control an awful lot, but like TCP, TCP provides a certain level of guarantees about security, and you can build secure protocols on top of TCP. In a sort of similar way, you can take the browser platform as it's delivered and build secure apps on top of that, but it takes more work. So the browser companies can make it easier for us to build secure apps, but at some level, we can compensate. We can build secure things on top of the platform that's available to us. And I think we're arguing about how much work it is and how complex it is, but it is possible.
I almost, to be honest, think it's, maybe this is a pessimistic view, I almost think it's irrelevant. If you took all the knowledge you had today and you went back and said, let's get rid of iframes, let's re-architecture everything so we never have CSRF, we have no XSS, it's just not possible, you're still going to have Jeremiah's autocomplete exploit. We're just going to be talking about different things, I think. There's just going to be other exploits people are going to find. Everyone thought stacked buffer overflows were the thing back in the day. Then we had integer overflows. Then we had printf, overflow. And now we have free after reuse exploits. I think we're just going to be talking about it something different. So I think, yeah, you can fix all these things, but the bottom line is there's still going to be some other vulnerability there. There's still going to be some other class that we're going to have to fight.
Right, so to me, that means that there's always going to be a responsibility on developers to build secure applications on top of an insecure platform.
I guess to me, it does. I'm not worried about job security. But I would like to, we don't need the vast number of vulnerability classes that we do today. It would be nice to not have some of them. Just having the autocomplete vulns and not having cross-site scripting and CSRF would have been nice.
Yeah.
HTTP only.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes down to severity too, and how likely is it that it's going to get exploited in the mass scale? So yeah, there are still ways to enumerate where people have been without using the CSS history hack. Does that make it less important that it was fixed? Absolutely not. Now it's much harder to do that exact same exploit. It takes much more time, much more intensive resources. It is something different, to your point. It is still possible. You can still do these exploits. It's just that it was worth shutting down I can scan the entire range of the internet in a few seconds out of your browser to, I can get maybe 1 or 2 a second kind of thing.
So a follow-up though, what is it going to take to get that gang of 4, the browser companies, to actually do something major to fix some of these fundamental problems?
Actually, interestingly enough, we had a meeting with the Mozilla guys there, and actually I thought it was a fairly productive discussion. We got to a really good idea of what their resources are, how they approach security, the help they needed from us, and so on and so forth. And I think you're going to see some OS activity around that, how the industry, the breakers and the builders are going to be helping Mozilla more. And they're gutsy enough to try certain things that might break certain features on the web, but they need our help to get that juice.
Wow, I feel like Geraldo Rivera here.
By the way,
It's the Mozilla guys right here.
and of course, that's not restricted to the Mozilla guys. They happen to be the ones that were cool enough to show up here and participate in our forum, but,
Where's the Chrome team?
Yeah, where's Microsoft? Where's Apple?
So we got breaking news at this panel. I feel like Geraldo Rivera without the mustache. Okay, so the types of people finding the vulnerabilities has moved from the individual security hackers, the researchers, to well-organized gangs trying to monetize these security weaknesses. Do you see more espionage, either like state-sponsored or corporate-sponsored, and the weaponization of these attacks going forward?
If we talk about on a mass scale, what you're going to hear in the press every day, what's affecting people, no. But if we talk about, are we going to go from the very, very few that we've seen so far, and let's say in the last 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years, to having it be commonplace that people recognize, yeah, it definitely happens. There are state government-sponsored attacks, that clearly are state government-sponsored. There are, corporate espionage attacks that clearly are, coming from corporations. The answer is yes. We see it today. I don't know if people who are following web AppSec stuff, I've seen some reports, but there's this threat called Stuxnet that's attacking, industrial control systems in Iran. It seems very clear it's state-sponsored. We expect to see more of that kind of stuff. Will it become what we deal with every day, what we call sort of the noise, the thing that's constantly stealing people's credit card numbers, the exploits on these web hosting sites that are dropping malicious executable to generate monetary gains? Probably not. But yeah, I think we're going to see more for sure.
So I agree that is what we will probably see. Where I disagree is that if I were a state and I wanted to do all these bad things and take over control systems and whatever, what better cover than botnets? Why not create my own? Sure, and I'll just go sell them and let people spam through them and put their viruses or whatever, because it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm more tied in with the people, and I can shut them off if I need to. It's my botnet. I can change it over to do the bad thing whenever I need to. It really is kind of an ideal sort of platform for doing all the sort of state-sponsored stuff they'd normally be doing anyway. We already know that they're investing heavily in botnet operations overseas. In fact, they've actually propositioned me to go